Hi, I'm Janet Bray with Islander Sewing Systems. And here we are, Tuesdays at 2, first Tuesday of the month. And this month we decided we wanted to discuss all things buttonhole. Buttonholes have been a frustration for seamstresses for the last 65 years approximately. Before that, it wasn't a problem, if you can believe that. So back in the day, when we only either had our little straight stitch sewing machines, which was before my time slightly, and then we got the heavy metal machines, and then they started doing zigzag in the 50s. Those were some beautiful machines, but rather than have a built-in buttonhole or a special buttonhole foot, they actually have buttonhole attachments. So this is a buttonhole attachment. And it hooks onto the screw on the left side of the needle. And this piece goes right on the needle bar to hold it in place. And that's how they accomplished beautiful, and I mean beautiful, buttonholes every time. Every time. Not what happens in the modern machines. So let me see some, give me a thumbs up if you have realized that. If you're sewing along and you did the first buttonhole and it came out really good. Second one, not so bad. And all of a sudden you get to the third one, and for some reason the buttonholer stops and goes across a quarter of an inch too soon. And now you got to tear the whole thing out. You can't just go back and fix it. You got to tear the whole thing out. And for those of us who've had to tear a buttonhole out, it is not fun. It's not something you want to have to do. Those stitches are really nice and tight, and they're hard to get out. So if you've had this happen, oh, what were you?
Laura.
Yes.
Says, after I make 1, 2, or 3, it gets so messed up, and then I find myself ripping out stitching, no matter how many perfect tests I make.
Okay, so Laura says the same thing. And so many of you are going to identify with this. You fiddle around, you put your test in, you you finally get it tuned where, and a lot of times it's not perfect, but it's the best you can do. You say, okay, and it makes a buttonhole and it ends and stops in the right place. But somewhere down the line, it doesn't. So here's the reason. The buttonhole feet and the built-in buttonholer in your modern plastic sewing machine either is measuring the distance. So it's saying, okay, I want a ½ inch up here. I got to turn the corner and I got to come down another ½ inch. So it's measuring. That is some machines. Some machines count the stitches. Say, oh, we go 100 stitches up, we got to come 100 stitches down. Well, then why does it stop too soon? Because something happens to bugger it up. You might hit a little lump in the fabric, and it makes 2 or 3 stitches right in the same place instead of keep going. So now it's counted those stitches, but it hasn't gone the distance. And the same thing happens with the distance. If it gets stuck or gets off track just a little bit, the mind of that foot or that operation is miscued. It's got the wrong information. So that's why that happens. We're getting phone calls here, and I well imagine it's because we got on late. So, anyway, so that's the problem that a lot of us can identify. And again, it's the modern plastic machines that set us up for failure. And we have been on the quest for a sewing machine that made a decent buttonhole again for this 65 years. And I will tell you, I can get on a soapbox about this because sorry.
That's all right.
I can't. I'm attention deficit and I can hear that message coming in. Hang on one sec. Okay, thanks. Women, everywhere we went, when we put on the big expo for almost 20 years, it was a constant cry, what machine makes a good buttonhole? I would go to the dealers, every brand, show me how to make a good buttonhole, show me a machine that makes a good buttonhole. Finally, they decided they came up with a good buttonhole in the hoop. I'm a fashion maker. I am not an embroiderer. I don't have a machine with a hoop. I don't want a machine with a hoop. And the last thing I want to do is spend all that time changing the machine and putting it in the hoop, when I know there's a better answer, because I used to make buttonholes like this when I was a teenager. So anyway, we've been on this quest for quite a few years because we found some of the vintage buttonholers. So I want to just show you a few of them here. And those of you who've been with me for a while, you know Jessica always teased me about having 100 buttonholers, but I bought a lot of them, trying to do my research and to figure out so that I could share it with you. So here's some of the things I've learned. First of all, these all, again, came from the 50s and the 60s. They don't make them anymore. But you can get an older machine that will take it. The new machines will not take the buttonhole attachment. Let me just show you. Can you see this one, Brenda? Okay. So the distance from the bed of the machine up to the housing on the new machines is way down here, and it's really fat. So you cannot get the attachment in there. If you could get the attachment in there, it would work because it does all the work. This makes the buttonhole. All you do is set the machine at zigzag, and this does all the work. So this is its only job. And when something only has one job, it does it well. And that's what I love about these buttonholers. And you'd think I was selling them the way I'm talking about them, but I do love it. And so you say to me, well, Janet, I want to get one of those. How do I know which one to get? Well, first of all, you've got to consider what machine that you might have to put it on. And if you have an older metal zigzag machine in good condition, chances are you can find one. And what you'll find is there are several types. There's a high and a low shank. Every machine identifies as either a high or a low shank or a high or a low bar. And that is where these screws come in. The low shank, the low bar, measures a ½ an inch down from that screw or this screw. The high shank measures an inch. So if you wanted to go out and buy a buttonholer, make sure you know the machine you're going to put it on, because they won't work otherwise. Michelle she bought one of these machines and got a buttonholer with it, but it wasn't the right buttonholer because it's a low, and hers was a high, so it won't even come all the way down. She puts the foot down and the attachment's still hanging in the air. So that's very important. It's also very important to know if you have a slant needle. Okay, so this machine that I have fallen in love with is a Singer 401A. It has a slant needle. These have a superior reputation for lasting. And they have some cams and some zigzag stitches. I will never need the cams, nor will I ever use them. But I need to set a zigzag stitch so that, and I just actually bought a table, got this all set up with an extension around it, a nice table, flatbed, and this machine will only ever do buttonholes. It'll always just be set up to do buttonholes. But you may not have that much space or that, want to do that, but that's the way I'm doing it. And again, these are solid. Brenda, Michelle, and I have all bought one in the last month or so, a couple months, since August anyway. And Michelle took hers in because she needed, a little spindle or something was broken, and she took it in, and the guy said, I saw you coming in with a used old machine. He said, and I would have turned you away if it wasn't that one, because that one is repairable, and it's a beautiful machine and will always work. So take note, Singer model 401A, and I believe the 400 or the 403, some of them don't do zigzag. So make sure that you're getting the machine that's going to do the buttonholer if that's what you're after. And again, there's so many. Now, where can you buy a buttonholer? eBay or Etsy is where I found them. There's a lot on eBay. Keep in mind that a lot of the people who are selling them don't know what they have. So in other words, I've gotten them where they were for the wrong machine. Michelle bought this machine and got one of these beautiful little Singer buttonholers with it. But this is a low shank and her machine's a high shank. So even though she got a buttonholer, she can't use it. So be very cautious and mindful of that. And again, what type? I've tried several older machines thinking that they would all work just as well. And I did not have anywhere near the success that I've had with this one. And I just want to show you again the buttonholes. And they just come out every time. Not one buggered up. And I did these in a hurry because I wasn't ready. So, if that's been a bugger for you in your sewing and you like to make blouses and shirts and things that have beautiful buttonholes in them, this is the answer to your dilemma. Absolutely. Okay, so let's show them how this works. Want to make a buttonhole? All right. And then I kind of skipped, but I'll just circle back to the other thing. Okay, so I've got this lined up fairly well. Oh, you know what? Before I do that, I want to show you how I mark buttonholes. So this is a pretend buttonhole placket, okay? And this line down the center, we call that the center front line. So on every pattern, there's going to be a center front line. And that's where your buttonholes go. So always have that marked, either with chalk or you can thread trace it. Sometimes I thread trace it because the chalk's going to wear off by the time I get to putting the buttonholes in. But you want that marked. Then you mark your top of your first buttonhole and you mark it the width that you need. Then you go down the distance between the two buttons, make another long line, the distance of the buttonhole, long line. Now, these are starting to wear off. I don't know if you can see them, but let me remark them so you can see what I'm talking about. These lines are so important in making a buttonhole, even if you're using your automatic buttonholer in your machine. Because when you set the foot down and you want to precisely set the needle where you want the buttonhole to start, it's hard to see. But if your lines are way out to the left and the right, you have some peripheral vision. And if this line is going way down here, you know, if you had to look and make sure you were in the center of it here, that's harder. But if you look down here, you can kind of eyeball straight up. And then you can keep your buttons in alignment. And yes, I know they're not equal distance apart. Like I said, I was in a hurry, but I just want you to see the concept. So that's how we mark a button placket. Straight down the center, and then every button is on the center front. And again, I want to emphasize, make the line the full length of the shirt. If you stop and make a buttonhole here, stop and make a buttonhole here, stop and draw a buttonhole here, what can happen is you could be an 1/8 off this way, an 1/8 off this way, 1/16 off, and your buttonholes are just a little wavy. But if you draw that straight line and you put them right on that line, they'll be right in line every time, no extra work. Okay, so let's stitch a buttonhole so you can see what I'm talking about. And again, I've got this lined up. I think it's on there straight, but basically there's a white dot here, and you want to line that up with that center front line. And there's a white dot just behind this finger, which gets lined up on the center and somewhere where you decide within the perimeter of the buttonhole. All right, and then you just push the foot pedal down and you go around twice. And you don't need to do a thing. Now you may find sometimes you want to go around more or less depending on the garment you're making and the type of thread you're using. There's lots of great options. And you want to stop about where you started, and there's our buttonhole. And I'll just slide it down and pull it along, put the next one in, and in 2 or 3 minutes I've got 6 buttonholes. All right, now back to your automatic buttonholer in your modern sewing machines. And honestly, I pulled both of these pictures off the internet, and I'm just saddened because so many people, and we probably have some here that are a lot younger than I am, and they don't know this isn't a good buttonhole. They don't know that once upon a time they could have had a buttonhole like this. So they're thinking, and these were 2 brags. These are brags from sewing machine companies that this is the wonderful buttonhole you can get with their machine. You can tell by the sarcasm in my voice, I'm not in agreement. So here's what the problem is. These buttonholes, the zigzagging is so far apart that you have all this space between your zigzags. So now you're going to cut down the center, and you're going to have all this fabric all the way back to here that's going to fray. And now you're going to have all kinds of threads that you're going to have to constantly be trimming or just look sloppy. What we want is this really nice tight edge. So this zigzagging is way too far apart. But most modern machines can't do it that tight, or it starts buggering up, or I don't know what it does, but it doesn't like it. So here, I exaggerated the zigzag being overlapped. So it's 2 times around, and it's closer together than this, so it overlaps. Now when we cut down the center of here, it's almost perfect. There's a few little open spots, but they aren't big enough to cause any problem. So the other thing I do, especially if you have any, if you're using fabric that frays a lot, fine fabric or something, put a bead, a fray check, in the center of the back of the buttonhole. Just right down the center of the back of the buttonhole. Before you cut it. That's it. Let it dry, and then cut it, and it won't fray. So, and I don't want them to fray even if I do have a beautiful buttonhole. I don't want a buttonhole like this, and I don't want a buttonhole like that. I sew because I'm proud of what I do, and I enjoy wearing and sharing my garments, and I know that it can be better than this. If you don't know it can be better, then you wouldn't be searching out for something, but I know it can be. All right, so then let's talk about cutting that buttonhole open, because there's a few things that I can share with you on that. All right, so when we go to cut the buttonhole open, here is a tool that you can pick up at any fabric store. Sometimes they have a little mat, and they also have a cutter. But all these little cutters, I have 3 or 4 of them here, they're fairly thick. And the problem I find with them is I set my, let's say I set this down, and I want to cut this. As soon as I set this over, I can't see. Now I'm wondering, Am I too close to the stitches over there? Am I too close to the stitches over here? And sometimes you're going to cut a few of those threads because this is thick and you don't have a good clean line of sight. So I've taken it using a X-Acto knife, just a plain old X-Acto knife. It's X-A-T-O, X-Acto. Many people pronounce it X-Acto. There's no E, only an X, so it's X-Acto. And now all I have to do is just slice down through the center. And I bet this is the one I put the fray check on, so it's still wet. But you'll be able to slice right down through there. It's wet. And I've got a pretty thick interfacing in here too. Oh, and let's remember to always put the interfacing in when you're going to put a buttonhole or a button on anything. I know there's ready-to-wear sometimes, and I know there's patterns that will tell you, just double fold the fabric and forget the interfacing. They're foolish, and I don't agree with them because your fabric wears down after washing and wearing, and it gets softer. So that's when you really need the interfacing, is later. All right? So this is the one I didn't fray check, but you see, even with that beautiful buttonhole, there's still a little few frayed threads here. And I can get rid of those pretty easily. And again, if I had the fray check, I wouldn't even have them. But if you have a buttonhole like this, whoa, you're not going to get rid of them. Oh, I feel like I've been on a marathon. What kind of questions do we have? So when I go, she's going to look those up, but when I go and do my center front, I use a chalkener. And then I love the quilter's rulers, even though I'm a fashion sewer. And then you can draw that line so perfectly, and you know your buttonholes will look stellar.
I'm not going to mention brand name.
Okay. Oh, yeah, we don't want to disparage any brands.
Gail says she has a top-of-the-line machine that makes awful buttonholes.
They all
She dragged out her 25-year-old other machine and works great, makes beautiful buttonholes.
Okay.
She's glad she kept it.
She's lucky, because 25 years ago, they were not making good machines then either. And let me talk to you about that buttonholer that's a square plastic that sits at the back of the foot and you stick your button in it. Gosh, when I first saw that, I think it was in the 60s, early 70s. Anyway, I thought, oh, what a great idea. Well, no. Because that whole apparatus sticking out behind the foot easily gets caught up on stuff. And that's where those cattywampus buttonholes come from. Where are my cattywampus? That's how come you get these. That buttonhole foot is notorious for doing that. Plus, you can't put a buttonhole on a placket and anything narrow because that thing is so big and so long, it just gets caught up. Or if you don't have room for it, you can't put the buttonhole in.
Claudia asked, are you going to talk about the direction of the hole, vertical versus horizontal?
I'd be happy
I must
to.
do horizontals as bust line is large. Also center hole on bust line not above or below or gaping.
Okay, so we've got a question about vertical versus horizontal versus vertical buttonholes. So, do the buttonholes go up and down, or do they go across? Which one is correct? Now, we have someone who said that she likes horizontal holes because she has a big bust. So, if you have a big bust and you don't have the right amount of ease in your shirt, it gives you a little more ease because that buttonhole, I don't do them, but that buttonhole will allow that button to slide a little bit. So if your buttonhole is a 1/2 inch, you got about a 1/4 inch, almost 1/2 inch ease there extra. But I would prefer to custom fit my shirt so that I could have vertical buttonholes, because that's not really the best answer, but I understand why you're doing it. Okay, so shirts and blouses are traditionally vertical. It does not mean they have to be. They're also, shirts and blouses are traditionally 1/2 inch to maybe a 3/8 inch button. But it doesn't have to be. You can do your own thing. That's why we sew. That's what we love to do. But if you go too far outside the norm and you're sewing for somebody else, they might not wear it. So I'm going to give you an example, because I've taught a lot of men's shirt classes. And the women will say, oh, yeah, this is great. Oh, my husband's going to love this. And they make these beautiful shirts. And the ones that stay with the traditional techniques, the husbands are thrilled. They go to work. They brag to all their friends. But the ones that make one mistake, and that is they put big buttons on it. Men are used to the same shirt that laps over the same way, with the same amount of buttons, the same size button, and it's always in the same place. And that is a comfort zone for a lot of men. They're not like women. We don't care. One buttons, one zips, another one's a pullover. We like variety in our fashion. They like comfort and reliability. So when they put these giant buttons on, and sometimes they put like 5/8 inch button on, sometimes 3/4 inch, and I'd say, you know, that's kind of a big button for a man's shirt. Oh yeah, but my husband has big hands. Most men do. So it isn't really an issue. So don't fall into that trap unless he's on board. So, but we traditionally carry the 18s. So the buttons we carry are 18s, which is, you're measured by lines. It's just, it won't make any sense to any of us, but it's by lines. Horizontal lines, I think, is the way they measure them. So that's an 18. An 18 is slightly smaller than a 1/2 inch. So if you ever get into that trap, that's the traditional men's and women's basic button-down shirt button. But you'll see everything. Went out to dinner with a young man in New York a few years ago, and he had on a shirt that had like, well, I'd say at least a 3/4 inch button on it. And I said, where'd you get that shirt? And he told, I think it was a guess. And he said, why? And I said, well, usually they don't put that size button, but I liked it. And I did like it. So sometimes it's out of tradition, but it's pleasing and you like it, do it. Okay, so what else do we want to know? And I haven't even looked at my outline. What else do we want to know about machine buttonholes?
Laura asked the question earlier of, she said that after 3 buttonholes, it messes up. She says it doesn't get longer. At some point it starts stitching in place and won't feed, so I get a knotted mess. And then she also, I think it was her.
Oh, Laura.
Yeah, are you saying that the only option is to buy an older machine?
Laura, yes. Absolutely yes. Girl, I've been sewing since I was 16, well 11, but really adamantly since I was 16. I have never, and I'm a professional, found anything that makes a buttonhole that's inside of a sewing machine. It's always the attachment. Now, in the garment industry, they have these big $5,000 to $10,000 buttonhole machines, and that's all it does. And you stick your fabric in there, go really fast, and it cuts a hole for you too. It's a beautiful machine, but who's gonna pay for a $10,000 buttonhole machine? And I used to work with a lot of the sewing machine company presidents, and we would sit down for a rap session sometimes, and always came up. Sandra Betsina and I always would say, why don't you make a buttonhole machine? Why don't you make something that does a decent buttonhole? And they always wrote it down, but nothing ever happened. So no, you do want to get on that quest. If you are a garment sewer and you want reliable buttonholes, Laura, I sat down and put 6 buttonholes in 5-7 minutes. And I didn't have to worry, was it going to bugger up, or which one was it going to bugger up on? Is that worth $350? because that's what this machine cost me. And you can get them cheaper. Brenda, what did you pay for yours? If you don't mind.
$150.
Brenda got one for $150.
And free shipping.
And free shipping. And Michelle got one for $35. She had to drive across town to pick it up, and it needed a lot of cleaning. But it works great. So you have lots of options that way. And if you go to eBay, the button attachments, $12 to $50, depending on the seller and what they've got. So I think it's well worth the investment. And I kind of think we overspend on our sewing hobby anyway. A lot of times we think, hey, I've worked all my life. I took care of the kids. He's got the boat. He's got the whatever. I'm going to treat myself to the top of the line sewing machine because I deserve it. No, not me. I would rather have 3 machines. I would rather have my light industrial straight stitch machine, which you've all seen me sew on. Sews 1,500 stitches a minute. Most of the companies make them, but they don't really promote them because they're not expensive. So there's not as much profit. I would rather have that as my straight stitch, and this is my buttonhole, and I have 2 sergers. One's the serger, and one is the cover hem. And I'm all lined up, and whatever I have to do, I can move right on. I don't have to stop and change adjustments and feet or remember to put it back, because that doesn't happen anymore. The memory's going. But anyway, okay, yes.
Laura does have a point. It's not the money, it's the space.
Right. Okay, so these come with, there's a little thing it sets in, and then there's a case. So you snap the case onto this bottom part, and you can put it in the closet when you're not making buttonholes, if you don't have the space in your sewing room. But Laura, the space for this is well worth all those buggered up buttonholes. I don't know. Do you get stressed out when you think, oh, I gotta make buttonholes? Or do you avoid making buttonholes because you know they're gonna bugger up?
Patricia has a specific question that
Okay.
she says, will the buttonholer work on a Bernina 1630? And
I have no idea. Who is that?
Patricia.
Patricia is asking, will it work on a Bernina? What was her name? 1630. I don't know Berninas. I've never been fortunate enough to own one. I understand they're beautiful machines, and especially the older ones. People don't let them go because they are well built. The thing is, can you point this back over here? This is what you want to look at, is this distance right here. How much room do you have? And you can go measure that in your Bernina. Okay, so this thing, what the hell is that? That's at least 2 inches. So you got to have at least 2 inches of clearance. 2.5 is better. I think I got about 2.5. What do you think, Brenda? Is that about 2 3/8? Something like that. So from here down, that's the clearance that you need. Like I said, this doesn't talk to this, and this doesn't talk to this. You just put a zigzag in here, and this guy takes over. There's no technical communication. It's all mechanical. So that's the beauty. Many years ago, when I needed a buttonholer because I was making coats and selling them, my sewing machine repairman actually rearranged one so it would fit on an old machine I had because it didn't quite fit on there right. So he fixed it so it would, and I made a lot of buttonholes. And I regretted not having that machine for a long time.
Repeat the number of the thing.
Repeat the number of the machine?
Yes.
The model of this machine, now let me tell you, you'll see them for $500 and up because they are collectible. So the model is 401A. I'm not a collector. I don't know anything else about that entire line except for one woman told me she bought the 403 and it didn't zigzag, so she couldn't do the buttonholes. So make sure, but I can tell you for certain and practical experience. Someone came to our sale in the yard, lovely lady, I wish I'd gotten her name, She came by way of Brandy from Make It So. And she started telling me about how she collects these. And she has 2 or 3 of them. And the kind of prices and all that. I went after the sale that night, went to eBay and bought this machine. So I'll have to get a hold of Brandy and find out who this lady was and thank her, because I've never been so happy. So that is the case. So these are collectible 401A, and it's a slant needle. So again, if you're buying a buttonholer, you got to know if you have a slant needle machine. You have to know whether it's a high or a low shank. And you have to know if you have enough space below the housing around the needle. Okay. That should be it, hey? All right. So let's talk about another kind of buttonhole. Bound buttonholes. Now, I know some of you are probably squeamish because you've tried it and it didn't come out so good, and it seemed nearly impossible, if not at least stressful. Well, my aunt came up with this system back in the 60s, and it is so foolproof. A brand new sewer can make a perfect bound buttonhole by following the directions. And I want you to see how beautiful. This one is, I haven't taken this is the thread tracing to mark where I wanted my buttonhole. So I haven't taken that out yet. But look how beautiful that buttonhole is. And here's another one. This one is also a bound buttonhole. So I want, if you're not familiar with bound buttonholes, please say so that we can help you understand them better. But basically, bound buttonholes are like welt pockets. You make welts and you sew them in place. But it's the precision of very square corners and exact distance on every equal side that gives you the square buttonhole with the equal size lips. And that's where people get off, because you can't be off a stitch. But the way Margaret did it, you won't be. So it's fabulous, and it's really fun to do those. But let me show you what happens. And if you've made bound buttonholes that look like this, and that's why you're discouraged. First of all, these are, from what I can tell, are not, this one particularly is not a bound buttonhole. This is a cheater bound buttonhole. So the cheater bound buttonhole does not sew welts. It sews a window, faces a window. And then it takes a piece of fabric over that window and it folds welts. Let's see if I can do it. And it folds the fabric into welts and it stitches them down. But the welts are not stable. And if you try to make them stable by stitching, you're going to inevitably, which is what I think happened here, is they caught the welt in here. So now they got these little puckers here. So if you've made the cheater, you weren't even going to have the best buttonhole. But if you've made the bound buttonholes and found it stressful and not successful, I invite you to do this. These are wonderful. And this one is ultra suede. You don't even need to put interfacing in ultra suede. You just fold it in half and it makes the most beautiful buttons, and you can do some contrasting. You can do stripes and chevron the stripes on your buttonholes. You can do all kinds of great things. But generally, it's a 1 inch to a 1.5 inch button that you're going to put this much effort into. But let's say you make a nice winter coat and it's got 1 to 3 buttons. Nice big 1.5 inch button, nice big beautiful welts on there. It just gives it sophistication, class, and it looks expensive. So I love these buttonholes, and they're difficult. And once you've accomplished these buttonholes, you can do the same thing with welt pocket. Now, if you did, this is, sometimes I've seen this. Oh, it's so sad. Now this one, they really did use welts, because she's overlapped her welt, or he or she, as you can see right here. These welts have to be flush, completely flush. and they got overlapped. Or this one is too big for the space that it's in, so it has to overlap. And so if you've had those experiences, take heart, because we have the answer to bound buttonholes. And I've been teaching this class, I don't know how many years now, online. So if I'm invited to do an online conference or something for American Sewing Guild, I've done it for the people at Washington State University in Puyallup, and it was an overwhelming success, and it sold out every time. I always ended up having to add sessions. So I can tell you it's an excellent class, and everybody loves it. So we decided that we should have it all the time. So we put it up on the website sometime late last night. It's our bound buttonhole class. So it's part of our online video downloadable classes. You'll have this class for life. So you go on and you can take a look at it. But, you know, so you make some bound buttonholes this year, and then you don't make any for another year and a half, and you go, oh, wait a minute, how did I do that? You'll always have this. And you'll have two options to view it. You'll be able to view it right through our website, or you'll be able to download it into an app. And then you'll have it on up to 3 devices, so you can take it anywhere. Take it to your sewing retreat. Take it to your mother-in-law's while you're making her a beautiful new coat for Christmas.
And Deborah has a testimonial.
Deborah.
This is the best bound buttonhole method ever. Perfect every time.
Oh, Brenda, come over here and say that. Who is it, Deborah?
Deborah.
Okay, this is Deborah's quote. Brenda, go ahead.
Deborah. This is the best bound buttonhole method ever. Perfect every time.
And that is true. Thank you, Deborah. I appreciate you saying that, because obviously I would say that right. But I've made a lot of them. And after you've made a few, it's not even a daunting task. You're like, oh, yeah, I'll whip out a couple of those and make that jacket a little bit more special. Yeah, so that's fun. But I really appreciate that, Deborah. She must have taken one of the online. Yeah. So that class is now up and available. And again, you can put it on up to 3 devices. You know what? I forgot to tell you guys, don't start buttonholes without putting a fresh needle in. Unless you know darn good and well it's not been used very much, like you put it on when you first started the project. Because that can make a big difference. If you have the tiniest little burr on your needle, your zigzagging can get all messed up. I find that on rolled hems on my serger. I don't do them very often, and I'm not real good about remembering to change the needles on my serger. So then when I'd go to do a rolled hem and I couldn't get it to balance, and I have a baby like that. You don't need to make any adjustments on them. Well, what's wrong? Change the needle. Perfect. This needle was old and it had some kind of imperfection that you can't even see with the naked eye. So keep that in mind. Needles are worth purchasing. Don't be frugal with your needles. Be frugal with a lot of things, but you want a good, fresh quality needle. And my preference is Schmetz. Okay. I think that is it. Oh, and gosh, I hope you guys stuck around, because I was supposed to tell you that we had a surprise. What you got, Brenda?
First 10 get kicked.
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, that's in the newsletter. So the first 10 people that purchase today the bound buttonhole class will get the free kit. So the kit comes with a little wool flannel that has already been interfaced, pressed in half so that you can put your buttonhole in. And it'll also come with the pre-pressed and fused welting fabric for you to make the buttonhole. So all you got to do is sit down at the machine, click on your video, and make your buttonholes. So, yes, I'm glad you said that. But the first 10 will get the kit. Also, anyone purchasing this class is going to get a surprise gift certificate. So, stay tuned and watch for that. We are still in the process, so I don't want to give anything away, but I thought I'd just tease that. And but we hope you'll take advantage of that bomb buttonhole class. It's fabulous. And if you have any questions you think I can answer about machine buttonholes, I'm happy to. But please remember, I'm not an expert on vintage sewing machines. One question you might ask is, they also make, the first company to make these was called Grice. It's a German company. And what was I going to tell them about that? I just don't remember.
German precision?
Yeah, there is German precision in this, but I think I had a train of thought I was going on and I lost it. But I think I was just going to reiterate to make sure that you know that it's going to fit the machine. Don't be like me and go out and buy 20 and then have to go through. But of course, I was able to find one for Brenda, and I'm hoping to find one in my box for Michelle too, so we all have one. But yes, make sure that you know that it's a high or low shank, 1/2 inch or 1 inch. Make sure that you know whether it's a slanted needle or not. And that's about it. Oh, I know where I was going. The Grice. The original ones were these guys, are similar to this. And they went on the straight stitch only machines. So back in the day when my grandmother only had an old Singer, it wasn't a treadle, but it was the black and the big cabinet. And we would make our buttonholes with a buttonhole attachment that looked similar to this. But it had to do the zigzagging too. So you had a straight stitch machine. So this thing has to do all that to do the zigzagging. It is adequate, but a machine that has a zigzag stitch in is superior. So in case that would come to mind later, or somebody says, oh, they do them for straight stitch, just keep in mind you'll get a much better buttonhole with a zigzag machine and that type of buttonhole attachment. Okay, I think I got it all now. I'm going to be in Florida next week, and I will be in the Orlando area. And on Wednesday, the 9th, I'm going to be near the airport at a hotel, and I will be happy to make appointments for people who need an appointment to have some help with their fitting of a sloper. A lot of us are working on the knit sloper, but I'd be happy to help you with a woven sloper. You need to let me know that you want to come by sending me an email, islandersewing@comcast.net. We'll set up an appointment that works for both of us. I'll tell you what you need to do to be prepared. And basically, we're not going to sew it, but I'm going to help you identify where the seams need to be, the new seams, and we'll pin it and mark it, and then all you'll have to do is go home and sew on the line and trim your pattern. But I can explain all of that. But if you're having any trouble or you feel lost in making your own sloper, and you will be down there in Orlando next week, I would be happy to help you. And I do think that's all for this. I feel like we've gone an hour and a half or something. All right, good. So, unless there's any other questions, we're glad you came. I'm Janet Prey. I'm here with Brenda Rogerson. We're the two gals that basically run Islander Sewing Systems here. We do the videos, the Facebook, the patterns, the sales. Brenda does the shipping. We just kind of have a lot of jobs. So just let us know if there's any other way we can help you. Have a wonderful October and enjoy your sewing. Thanks so much from Islander Sewing Systems again. Happy sewing!